Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of Late Night with BDD. I'm your host, BDD, aka Brooklyn Dad. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest tonight. It is my unique pleasure and privilege to present with you our returning guest. She's a comedian. She's a celebrity. She is a veteran. And she is the creator of Mueller She Wrote, as well as the You Don't Know Jack podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me for a warm welcome to our friend of the show, Dr. Allison Gill, aka Mueller She Wrote.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. So we had a few minutes, you guys, before the show started. Allison and I had a few minutes to just kind of compare notes on what kind of day today was, right? And see, to my untrained legal eye, I don't have a legal eye for shit. It seemed like legal Mageddon. It just felt like it felt like a lot of shit was going down, right? We had Michael Cohen testifying against Spanky McDumbass this morning in New York City. We had Jenna Ellis crying crocodile tears, real or not, but also because she was copping a plea. She was pleading guilty. She was flipping, basically. And then the big tamale was towards the end of the day. We had former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows being granted immunity. Now, that seemed like the big deal to me. Our guest tonight is going to explain to the rest of us noobs why it's not as big a deal. But she's not going to explain that yet. What I first want to get into, for as long as we've got everybody's attention, I want you to share with our audience where they can find all of your fantastic content.
Sure. Well, I'm on every social media platform known to man as Mueller She Wrote, if you want to find me there. But also you can go to mswmedia.com and you can see our collective of independent podcasts on that network. And I think you'll find a lot of really great shows and a lot of like-minded people.
Excellent. MSW.com.
MSWmedia.
Excuse me. MSWmedia.com. Check it out, folks. Now, I want to get back to a little anecdote he shared with me just before we kick things off. So what I was saying is that I got the biggest thrill today from Jenna Ellis's plea, because we got to see it on video, and she shed tears, which I didn't really feel. It felt like she was doing it because she was caught. You know, like when you were a kid and you got busted out there, you didn't really have remorse, but you had remorse that you got caught. That's what those tears felt like to me. But you had a run-in with her, didn't you, Allison? Can you share that with our audience?
I did. Brooklyn Dad. I didn't know we rolled the R in Brooklyn Dad, but yeah, because I feel the same way. I know the Meadows thing is a big deal. I don't know that it's as big a deal as the Jenna Ellis thing, and we'll get to that in a second. But it felt fake to me. It felt like a Kyle Rittenhouse moment. It felt like every time I get pulled over by the police, right? That's just what we do. We cry, and then we get to go home for free.
Does that work?
It depends on who you are, but yeah. So that's the privilege, right? And she's so used to it. That's just that's how she rolls. But about, I think back in May, she posted something really dumb on Twitter, like about Mike Flynn or something stupid. I can't even remember what it was, but I'm kind of known on Twitter for my clapbacks and replies. Like I usually will say something to somebody stupid and it'll ratio their tweet, meaning I'll get more likes on my reply than they get on their initial tweet. So I just said like PFFFFT, shut up, like, or something like that. And she replied to me back in May. She's like, cry more. And then that was it. And I was like, ooh, all right, cry more. I'm gonna take that, put it in my pocket, leave it for a little while. So come August, she gets indicted with 18 other co-defendants by the district attorney, Fonnie Willis, who is a badass. And, everyone who's like, oh, it's a weak case. People don't plead guilty to weak cases. So, and even Elie Mystal agrees with me on that. We don't agree on much, but we agreed on that. And he's a very good friend of mine. I don't want you to get the wrong impression. But so when she was indicted, I found that cry more tweet, and I said, "Who's crying now?" Fart target is what I called her.
Oh,
and
fart target.
It just felt right. It's got good alliteration, good consonants. Fart target. So. And it just came out. I was like, what do I call her? Like shit box, trash can, slut bag, coos, like dick box. No, fart target. It just came out.
It's perfect.
So then today, the lady who told me to cry more, cried on national television. And I couldn't have been happier about it. And here's the thing though, if she were crying and was like, I lied and I did the wrong thing and I apologize and da-da-da. But what she did was she kind of avoided any responsibility at the end. She's like, I accept responsibility. But she said, I was listening to lawyers with more experience than me. And I was doing what the lawyers told me. Like you knew, because there were other lawyers, Pat Cipollone, Pat Philbin, Hirschman. There were tons of lawyers who were like, no, don't listen to Rudy Giuliani. And if you're gonna say there were more experienced lawyers who fart more than I do, and I had to, go along with what they said, and then you're crying at me about how sorry you are, you don't sound sorry to me. Those are those like, I'm so sorry you feel this way, kind of an apology, right? So I wasn't really buying it, but I reveled in the fact that she was crying on national TV. So I took that cry more tweet right out of my pocket again, put it back on Twitter. I said,
good.
Cried on national television today. Thank you. Because I have been crying these last 6 months, right? So that was good. But legally speaking, the Jenna Ellis plea, to me, is probably the most consequential thing that happened in the Donald Trump criminal enterprise today, even maybe more so than Mark Meadows, because her plea deal is a little different than the other three, right? We're only down to 15 co-defendants now because Scott Hall, the bail bondsman, he copped a plea. Then we had the Cheese and Kraken, right? Kenneth Chesbrough and Sidney Powell copped a plea. But in their pleas, they just had to record a proffer statement, write a sorry letter, pay a fine or some restitution, and do 5 or 6 years of probation. But what Jenna Ellis has to do is she has to make herself available for continued interviews and proffer sessions with the DA's office, ongoing. So she doesn't just get to record one, sort of proffer and then she's done. She has to be available for additional interviews, testimony, possibly grand jury testimony, maybe testimony with the DA's office, questions with the DA's office. And that's ongoing, in addition to having, they all have to testify at whatever
they say honest testimony, right? So I want to know, when they say honest testimony, couldn't they just lie and say that they're being honest? Like, how do you know when they say the words honest testimony? I say to myself, well, we're assuming if they're giving testimony, it's going to be honest. Like, why? It almost feels like a trap door that they put in there. Why do they put that in there?
Because if they don't provide honest testimony, then the plea gets yanked out from under them and the charges are back on and they go to trial. And the thing is that prosecutors generally don't ask questions to a witness in front of a grand jury or at trial that they don't already know the answer to and have a bevy of evidence to prove. And when you're giving a proffer session, you're, in your queen for the day session, you can sit there and assume that the prosecutors don't know what you know, but that's a really dangerous gamble to make. Because if you aren't truthful about something and they know about it, and 9 times out of 10 they do, your whole deal is blown and you're back on the hook. And, these people are still also on the hook in other jurisdictions, like Jack Smith up in DC. Maybe some of them are culpable in the documents case down in Florida. We've got tons of them being sued by Dominion and Smartmatic, like Sidney Powell. So whatever she says in a court of law can be used against her in those civil cases. If she pleads the fifth, a negative inference can be taken in those civil cases against her. And so it's never, ever a good idea to half-ass cooperate. We saw it happen with Walt Nauta, and now look where he is. So that's kind of, it's just a bad gamble. And so I imagine we'll get full-throated, honest testimony out of Jenna Ellis. And boy, can she implicate a lot of people, including Rudy Giuliani.
Let me ask you another question, right? So we've seen 3 former Trump attorneys in a row cop plea deals. Is the order intentional, or the grouping, is it intentional? Is the prosecution sending a message by getting all of these plea deals in a row, basically?
Well, the way that I see it happening is they go to Scott Hall and they're going to pick him off first because he doesn't have a lot of money and he's not well known. And, he's not a political celebrity as far as anybody's concerned. And he's got a lot of good information. So they're going to go down there and they're going to pick off Scott Hall. Once Scott Hall flips, who's had an hour-long conversation with Jeffrey Clark the day he wrote the letter to Georgia asking them to send fraudulent electors, the fact that Hall worked with the Coffee County breach, which is what, his testimony probably really implicated Sidney Powell. He probably knows about the Ruby Freeman intimidation spoke of the hub and spoke conspiracy. But they get Scott Hall, then they can go after Sidney Powell. And once you get Sidney Powell, because the idea is to get these earlies, these speedy trial people out, like give them a deal so we don't have a speedy trial. And the reason you want to do that is because if you have a speedy trial, the prosecution gets to put on their entire case, and everybody, all the other 16 at the time, now 15 defendants who are going to go on trial down the road will get a chance to see what the prosecution has, and it gives them a leg up in preparing their defense. So one of the goals here, and one of the reasons that these are such great deals, is because you want to get rid of those speedies. So you pick off Scott Hall, that'll lead you to Sidney Powell. The cheese doesn't want to stand alone, so he'll flip too. Then you don't have a speedy trial to worry about. Everybody else can go sooner. The prosecution doesn't have to give up their case early to tip off the rest of the defendants. It's a win-win for everybody except the remaining 15 defendants.
Is it more meaningful when they get the lawyers to flip as opposed to non-lawyers?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine, particularly because then the attorney-client privilege is no longer there, which it really isn't anyway because of the crime fraud exception that pierces attorney-client privilege. And we've already seen it be ruled in the case of Kenneth Chesbrough, Sidney Powell, like, sorry, you can't use the crime fraud exception or the attorney-client privilege here, Mr. Chesbrough, because you were indicted. And so the crime fraud exception definitely applies here. His argument was, come on, it's a real low standard to indict somebody. It has to be, and the truth of the matter is in order to pierce the crime fraud exception, it has to be more likely than not, 50.1%.
Mm.
And the standard to indict somebody is probable cause. It is a lower standard, and that was his actual argument. But the Judge McAfee, who's a conservative judge appointed by Brian Kemp, was like, yeah, no, sorry, bro. An indictment pretty much clears up the crime fraud exception. So that was an interesting ruling that we got there. But it all sort of depends on what level the lawyer is. But the fact that these are lawyers, that's intense. And I've tweeted a long time ago that Mar-a-Lago was a magical place where people enter as lawyers and leave as witnesses. It's just what happens if you decide you want to be a Trump lawyer.
What do you think is the likelihood that Rudy Giuliani flips? Because me personally, I don't see him flipping. Actually, I see Rudy as like a guy who's at the end of his road, who's all he's got like nothing else to lose. I feel like he's lost everything. He might as well just you know uh bite the bullet and take one for the team. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but he doesn't seem like anything will like he'll be content. This guy who shaves in the freaking airport,
Farts on people.
yeah. I mean,
Shits his
what
face.
do you think?
Here's what I think, and I think he's already shown that he's doing this. If you look at the Ruby Freeman Shea Moss defamation lawsuit against him, he has at every turn refused to give up discovery, refused to give up his financial disclosures at the risk of sanctions. And he has been fined $140,000 in sanctions and attorney's fees. He's been Ruby Freeman and Shea Moss have been granted additional sanctions, including he's basically considered guilty at this point, and we're just going to have a trial for damages at the defamation happened. You don't have to prove falsity, don't have to prove actual malice. We're calling this defamation now. We're just going to find out what the damages are. And he did all of that, and he can't use anything in evidence that he hasn't handed over discovery. There's a bunch of jury instructions now that are sanctioned against him, including that the jury is allowed to assume that he's hiding a bunch of assets elsewhere when they determine damages. So just sanctions after sanctions after sanctions, because he doesn't want to give up whatever he has in discovery. It's worth it to him to all this whatever the damages are, which could be in the tens of millions of dollars, we don't know, is worth it to him to not hand over what he has in discovery. And so he's already kind of displaying this behavior. End of the term, I'm just never going to flip, right? I mean, if I were him, I'd be begging for one of those deals that like Sidney and everybody just got down
Why?
in Georgia, just to not go to jail there.
Okay.
Maybe I can get out of jail. But the thing is even if he wanted to flip, because he did offer Jack Smith a proffer session, and the way that I saw that kind of going down in my head is Jack Smith being like, yeah, sure, dude, come in. We'll see what you got. And be like, all right, we'll take it under advisement. I'm not going to, if I'm a prosecutor, why would I give a deal to Rudy Giuliani? I mean, unless I would have to put him on the stand. And he is one of the most unreliable witnesses. We saw this in the Rick Gates Manafort thing. Rick Gates was a horrible witness. The only reason Manafort got convicted was on the documents alone. So I'd be like, I don't even want you as a witness. Your face is going to melt off. Something's bad is going to happen. You're going to be weird. Terrible witness. I mean, he might have recordings of Trump. Remember how he used to say, I have an insurance policy if Donald Trump ever throws me under the bus. Maybe he's got some like dead to rights recordings or something. But the way that he's acting in this Ruby Freeman Shea Moss case, I don't think he wants to hand any of this stuff over. And even if he did, you'd have to put him on the stand. So I'm not sure anybody would even want to offer him a deal.
Interesting. Okay. The other thing that happened today was our friend Michael Cohen appeared to give testimony, and I had him share his opinion on the likelihood of a certain case being the most damning, the most threatening one to Trump. Do you mind if I share that with you and with the audience here?
Would love it.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so Michael, thank you for agreeing to let me ask you some questions here from my subscribers. As I said, we were discussing. I enjoy discussing the law with you because you have a very legal mind and you have experience with all this. I wanted to know, in your opinion, which case is the one that is most likely of all the different legal issues that Trump is facing now, which is the one that is most likely to put him behind bars?
So I think Donald will be held accountable for all 4 cases that are currently being prosecuted.
Wow.
However, I stand firm in my assertion, and I've said this many times, I'm going to say it to your listeners as well. I believe that the easiest case to prove, not the most sexy of the cases, is the Alvin Bragg Manhattan District Attorney case. And I say that because it is all predicated on documentary evidence, which is supported by testimony of a multitude of people that corroborate the documents. This is not even a case that Donald's testimony is necessary. If he does or doesn't take the stand, it makes no difference. The documents speak for themselves. But I always hear from people, but it's not like seditious conspiracy, the January 6th case being brought by Jack Smith. It's not, the willful retention of the secret documents at the Mar-a-Lago, location. All of these are much more significant cases. As far, it's not even as significant as trying to overturn a free and fair election. That's the Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis's case.
Right.
That's not the purpose of prosecution. Prosecution is for the basis of holding someone accountable for the breaking of a law.
Yeah.
Now, is an assault, 2 guys get into a fight, 1 guy knocks the other guy's tooth out. It's an assault and battery. Is that case as significant as a murder charge? 2 guys get into a fight, 1 guy pulls out a baseball bat and clubs the other guy, right? Mm-hmm. So now you also have additional information that you have to throw in there. One is with a deadly weapon, the other is with your hands. Clearly, the regular fist fight is not as sexy as the case with a baseball bat, but nevertheless, the person can go to jail on either of those cases. We need, as the public, to stop handicapping which case is more sexy, which is more significant. Mm-hmm. The goal, the way I see it in each and every one of these cases by the prosecutors, is to prosecute the case with the end result of a conviction.
Yeah. So Michael Cohen thinks Alvin Bragg's case is the easiest one, doesn't even require Donald Trump's testimony to prosecute. It's just completely independent of any testimony. It's basically just all documents and forms. Would you agree with that, or do you have a different opinion on the easiest case to prosecute?
I think that the strongest case, I should say, easiest or strongest, because I have a sexiest, a strongest, and maybe an easiest.
Wait. Let's start with the sexiest. Which one's the sexiest?
Well, the most important case here is the January 6th DC case. That's the most important case historically. Okay. Conspiracy against rights, obstructing an official proceeding, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, and defrauding the United States. What he did by trying to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power on January 6th is an extremely consequential case for history. And I think it's a very open and shut case. But that is the most important one. I personally think the easiest case is the Mar-a-Lago documents case, the obstruction part of that. We got it on video. He moved boxes. He went through them. He hid. He had a subpoena. He lied about what he handed over pursuant to that subpoena, and then he obstructed justice. And then he did it again by trying to destroy the videotape of the boxes moving. Then they tried to destroy the videotape of the boxes moving. So it's like obstruction inception. But it's so, like, you come out of the dream, out of the van, and you're like, spin the top. But I mean, that to me is just so open and shut. But it is complicated by the fact that there are classified documents and we have to go through the SEPA processes. And it's going to be a very long time before we even get to that trial because we have Judge Aileen Cannon. So the most likely case that he'll go to jail for first is the January 6th case, because Judge Jackson made it clear that she's not moving that trial date from March 4th. She's not. Now, I mean, it might get pushed back for, other reasons, but it won't be pushed back that far.
And it won't be pushed back because of the primaries. No,
she has said multiple times the election has no bearing on the date that this case happens. Everybody has a job. Yeah. I don't want to hear about your job being more important than some other criminal defendant's job. You're a citizen with a job. Whoa, congratulations.
Yeah.
Just because your job is running for president, I don't care. But I think that the Bragg case is very simple. Now, you are going to need to use Michael Cohen for testimony, I assume, in that case.
Yeah.
And today it was a little bit shaky, but I think he did a very fine job.
Why was it shaky?
It got yelly at the end, and people walked out in a huff. Might have had to do with the fact that Trump was there, and when Alina Habba was cross-examining Michael Cohen about his previous, because that's what the defense is going to do. They're going to try to impeach him as a witness because he has lied previously, as though he's the first, flipper to also not be a criminal. Like that. It's you have to do that for every single jury. Like it's a brand new jury, and it's never been done before. We've never used a criminal to testify against another criminal before. Mm-hmm. It happens all the time, but you just have to. But like Michael Cohen said, and he's right. Just like the Rick Gates and Manafort case, it didn't matter what Rick Gates had to testify to. And in fact, some of the jurors were like, I didn't like him. I didn't care for that guy. But it was on the documents. Even the one rural juror, the one MAGA lady who was like, I left my MAGA hat at the door. She convicted on 11 of the counts because she's like, it's in the documents. And so he is absolutely right on that. It's 34 counts. It's felony falsification of business records, but it is going to be difficult to use it's not novel to use a federal crime as an underlying act to pump it up from a misdemeanor to a felony, but it's never been used before that a federal campaign finance violation was used to elevate. Yeah. So it's kind of novel in that sense, which makes it a little more difficult, kind of like the SEPA proceedings in the Mar-a-Lago documents case make it a little more difficult. But I think he's right in that that's solely based on the documents. But Mar-a-Lago is based on videotape.
Yeah, I find it interesting that you said you think that the documents obstruction part is going to be easy, because I'm going to sound stupid asking this, but don't you do the videotapes show intent, and don't they need to show intent to prove obstruction?
I mean, there's three elements of obstruction of justice, and corrupt intent is one of them. Correct. But I mean, it's pretty slam dunk. Well, destroying videotapes, hiding boxes, moving boxes, lying to your lawyer about what you're doing. Saying to people, well, what if we just don't give them back? Him waving the document around Bedminster saying, this is classified. If I'm not president anymore, I could declassify it, but not. Like, you have him on tape telling you that he knows he's not allowed to have this shit, and he has it, and then he hid it, and it's on video that he hid it. Yeah. It's just especially with the Yuscil Taveras IT guy testimony. So, I don't know. We'll see. But for me, the case that's going to go first, and I think the case that'll put him behind bars before the 2024 election even happens, is the DC January 6th case.
Okay. The only reason I posed that question that way is because I get excited when people like Michael Cohen say he thinks Donald Trump can go to jail for all of the cases, and and when you talk about the obstruction, he should definitely go for that. I get excited because I am in we got him nowsville. That's where that's where I am,
We got him.
and
Yeah. No, well, Meadows.
I've
We
been
had
there
Meadows today.
before. I've been there before. I'm trying to manage my expectations. I don't want to get too up, or too down about anything. Just trying to,
Oh, come on.
keep an
Rolling
even
Stone put
keel.
out tonight that he's prepping for an avalanche of flippers in Fulton County now, and he's asking his lawyers to dig up dirt on all the co-defendants.
Oh shit. That makes
So
sense.
I think that'll happen. But we got that Meadows news today, which was a pretty big deal. But I want to caution everybody, if you read that report, you have to read it very carefully. He doesn't seem to me that he has full immunity and is fully cooperating. What seems to me has happened is he came in for a couple of interviews, pled the fifth, and then what I think happened, but I don't have any confirmation of this, is Jack Smith went to the judge and said, he can't plead the fifth, come on. And the judge said, yeah, he can plead the fifth. And he's like, all right, well, I'll give him limited use immunity for this testimony that I want, for these 7 questions that I want to ask him. And Judge Beryl Howell said, okay, actually might have been Judge Boasberg at the time, chief judge there, over the grand jury stuff. And so then Mark Meadows got immunity. And what I think he got is called limited use immunity, because if you read the story, he only really talked about the fact that he told Donald in mid-December that he lost the election and that there was no election fraud. And, it was very limited. He didn't talk about burning documents in the fireplace. He didn't talk about what was happening on January 6th with the insurrection. It didn't talk about a lot of that other stuff. But he did talk about what Donald Trump knew about the election. And I think that is important, because it seems to me that Jack Smith only asked him a very limited amount of questions. And what that means is that he's not cooperating fully. He only has limited use immunity on these things. And he's still on the hook for other crimes. Because when the indictment came down after they talked to Mark Meadows is still listed as an unindicted co-conspirator. And so if Mark Meadows had been given full immunity and was fully cooperating, he would have already cut a deal in Georgia and gotten no jail time. But he can't, because if he cuts a deal and testifies truthfully in Georgia, the reason he hasn't done that is because I think he's still on the hook for crimes in DC.
Why not indict him? Why is he still an unindicted co-conspirator? Why? What are they intentionally holding back on that, like as a threat or something, to compel his testimony or whatever?
Here's what I think, and I have no proof of this either. But if he indicts everybody, if Jack Smith indicts everybody for January 6th, all of those people could file motions to consolidate their case with Donald Trump and weigh it down and delay it. Right? So I think what maybe Jack Smith is doing is he's going to charge with the very simple 4 counts. Donald Trump, save the superseding indictments, not going to indict him on the super PAC, big lie, defrauding donors, not going to indict him on the live golf course real estate deals. I'm just going to, these 4 counts, simple. We can run the trial. He wanted it in January. It ended up in March. We can do it before the election. And it's just Trump. And then I think, and I talked to Andy McCabe about this on the Jack podcast, he calls them mop-up cases. Then you go around and indict everybody else, because the statute of limitations is far from being close to being over. You got plenty of time. Doesn't matter if you indict the rest of the MRFers before or after the election.
Right.
So that's what I think is happening, but I also don't know. There could be, we just found out today that at least 4 or 5, maybe 6 months ago, Meadows was offered limited immunity. How many do we not know about? So there's so many things that could be going on behind the scenes that might be the reason why he hasn't indicted anybody else. But I think it's because he wants a clean, simple Donald Trump conviction before he starts complicating it and making it a big sprawling type of a situation like we've got down in Georgia.
You are the first person I have heard talking about this limited use immunity thing tonight. So I thank you for sharing that perspective with me. It made me feel a little bit smarter tonight. To your trained eye, have you noticed anything, like when you look at all of these cases, do you see any coordination? Like, can you tell if like Jack and Fonnie are like, all right, listen, here's what we're gonna do next week. Do you see any kind of dynamic like that happening? Are they, and is there a need for them too, so that they're not like stepping on each other's toes or overlapping or whatever?
From my understanding, the experts I've talked to, sometimes there's a little bit of coordination about like when you get a witness where and when they're going to testify and things like that. But so far, what it seems like, and Fonnie Willis has said he probably doesn't even know my name. And I don't think that she would lie about that. I think if she were coordinating on a broader basis with Jack Smith, she would say, I don't have any comment on that. I'm not going to comment on the investigation. But she flat out said, we don't talk. He probably can't even pronounce my name right. He probably doesn't even know who I am. We don't talk. And so, that, and when I spoke to folks like Annie McCabe and Pete Strzok, and, folks who've done this for a long time, there usually isn't a lot of coordination. You usually run your own investigation. And then like if somebody needs to do a global or a universal deal, like let's say Sidney Powell wants to now deal with Jack Smith. Jack Smith doesn't call up Fonnie and say, send me that Sidney Powell character. What happens is Sidney Powell's attorney contacts Jack Smith and says, can we please have a deal? And Jack Smith is like, sorry, we don't reduce felonies to misdemeanors in my town. So you can have 1 to 5 years in prison with the felonies and you can say that you did it. But I don't really need your testimony. We did a proffer with you already and your stuff's kind of weak sauce. So, but who knows? But it's not a coordination generally between the prosecutors. That's usually the attorneys, the defense attorneys that are calling up and asking for that kind of a thing.
Fantastic answer.
That's what my expert friends tell me. This is not like me, like, well, when I was working at the Department of Justice.
You guys, I don't have Allison all night here. So if you have questions for her, we're going to limit it to what do you say? Two or three?
We do three. Now I'm not going to run for Speaker of the House. I know that everybody wants me to run for Speaker of the House, but I spend my nights like giving handies in Beetlejuice shows. I would be not the best person for the job.
That was insane. That was
like the coolest thing about her, honestly. The fact that she's like sitting there smoking a cigarette and giving fucking blowies in theaters. I'm like, that's like literally the coolest thing about you. If you weren't such a hypocrite about it, we might be able to be friends.
And it was a Democrat, no less.
Dude. Well, they have the best drag shows at their bars, and if you want to go see a good one,
Oh man. Let's see. AG, you have the best friends. Hum2 says we're looking for questions for this very important, very intelligent, and busy woman here.
Well, my friend is watching Friends reruns, and it looks like Chandler has the goatee, so he's back on drugs.
What?
Nothing. Go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. We have a political question. Do tonight's Dem wins push the GOPs in the House to start to play?
I think they're talking about the Dem wins, in the Phil, that like super fascist lady like lost for mayor and stuff like that. The thing is that we've had 35 or 36 special elections this year, and Dems have won 28 of them by 11-point margins on average. I don't know why tonight would make a difference. So I'm going to say no, because to me, the way that I see it, and again, I'm only guessing on everything, but Matt Gaetz and his 8 super MAGA friends and Donald Trump do not want there to be a Speaker of the House. They want the government to shut down because, if there's a government shutdown, Jack Smith is still funded. He's funded by a special fund out of the U.S. Treasury that's controlled by the Attorney General. It's got nothing to do with Congress. Congress can't defund Jack Smith. But if you shut the government down, at some point, the courts staff will run out of money and it could gum up the courts, which is good for Donald Trump.
Right.
And also, there is currently a House Ethics Committee investigation into Matt Gaetz, which is on pause right now when there's not a speaker.
Interesting.
He doesn't want there to be a speaker. And, Donald Trump endorsing Emmer and then Emmer getting the designee and then Donald Trump slamming Emmer and then Emmer quitting. I think they're just trying to pick off the moderates to try to force a MAGA in there. But they don't want to work with Dems, and they don't want to shut down. Think about it, if you're an autocrat, if you're a dictator, if you're a strongman, and your goal is to dismantle democracy, and you have successfully shut down one of the branches of government for 3 weeks, you're doing your goal, you're meeting your goal, because the autocrat is the one who says, Washington is in chaos, I alone can fix it.
Right. We've heard that before.
Strongman thing. And it sends a message to the world that democracy is chaos and ineffective. And that's the goal. It's a feature, not a bug.
Okay. We have one from Scott here, would like to know if you could please describe use immunity, I guess as in limited use immunity. Yeah.
Sure. To the best of my knowledge, because again, I've never spent a second in law school, and all my degrees are from online universities. But limited use immunity, as opposed to full immunity, full immunity means you can't be prosecuted for the crime
for anything,
for the crimes that we're investigating in this investigation.
Okay.
Limited use immunity is, you know what? I might still want to charge Mark Meadows with burning classified documents or putting them in Donald's trunk or conspiring to obstruct the official proceeding with the, not doing anything for 187 minutes while the mob attacked the Capitol or whatever it is. But I really he's the only one who can tell me, or he can give me really good insight on when he told Donald Trump that there was no election fraud or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. So generally what will happen is the prosecutor will ask, in this case, Jack Smith will ask Judge Boasberg, who is the chief judge of the DC DC District Court. He'll say, these are the 6 things that I need from him. I'll give him immunity for answering these, whatever he says in his answers to these, and with this limited set of behavior, I won't prosecute him on those things. And, a lot of times, the judge might not allow you to use that immunity, but generally, I don't think I've ever seen anybody be rejected when they've asked for to grant use immunity. Now I know that they tried to get I think Corcoran tried to plead the 5th at some point, and Jack Smith didn't want to give him immunity. And so he tried to get the judge to tell him he couldn't plead the 5th and compel him to testify. And that was Chief Judge Barrelhouse. He's like, no, bro, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to tell him that, he's got to give up his 5th Amendment right without being guaranteed that what he tells you he won't be prosecuted for. So that's kind of what the limited use immunity is. It's not full immunity. It's not, for example, Sidney Powell pleading guilty to the one felony. No, she pled guilty to 6 misdemeanors, and she cannot be charged in Fulton County at all for any of this stuff. Now she is fully immunized, right? But this is a very narrow set of circumstances and questions and answers.
Do you think it's anywhere on Jack Smith's list of things to do to squeeze Mark Meadows for information on Ginny Thomas?
I don't know.
because they were communicating, around that time, around, the January 6th, with the purpose of overturning the election. Could she be in some jeopardy?
Perhaps she could be considered part of the conspiracy if it can be proven that she was maybe communicating with her husband about potential administrative stays on election stuff in Georgia, for example. And if Meadows maybe had a discussion with her about, hey, do you think Judge Thomas, because each circuit, and the 11th Circuit covers Georgia, has one Supreme Court justice that oversees it. That's why a lot of us think there should be 13 Supreme Court justices, because there's 13 circuits, 12 plus DC. So he is the one guy that sits over the 11th Circuit. So if somebody needs an administrative stay, so for example, when the DOJ and Jack Smith was fighting Judge Aileen Cannon on the special master in the documents case, and somebody wanted a stay, an administrative stay. Can you pause this whole thing while we ask the Supreme Court? It would be just Clarence Thomas by himself that would issue that stay. And so if there's some sort of communication that has to do with Ginny, and perhaps Mark Meadows or Jeffrey Clark or anybody in that sphere that was trying to delay or at least get a favorable stay put down in Georgia on the election results. That's why Jeff Clark wrote that letter to Georgia saying, hey, we're investigating stuff. We need an alternate slate of electors. And they filed that lawsuit in Georgia specifically for the purpose of getting possibly Clarence Thomas to put a stay on that lawsuit, therefore delaying the signing and the certificate or the certification of the electors. Makes sense? So if they can prove that, then perhaps they're part of a conspiracy. But just texting with Meadows doesn't necessarily make you a criminal. I mean, it probably does, but you got to prove all those things. So I'm not quite sure, but we'll see what Jack Smith knows and how much he knows. But again, we might not find out any of that out until after Trump's trial and he does those mop-up cases, if he chooses to do them. We'll see.
You've answered like a few people's questions. I'm gonna kick the last one to you. One is actually, I'm gonna combine two into one. And Powerbeard says, do you ever sleep? You seem like you have the output of two people. It's more of a statement. And the question is from Hum2, wants to know, will you be going back to DC or NY for any of the trials?
Yeah, I've been thinking that I would like to go to DC for the January 6th trial. I was honored to be invited by my friends, Harry Dunn and Hodges and Ganell and all those guys, to the January 6th hearings. And just to be in that front row of history. And then when I was in Judge Chutkan's courtroom for the hearing that set the trial date in March, and I almost got in trouble, but I didn't get kicked out, so yay. And it was very, it was reverent, and it's something else to be there. It just really is. So I think I'd like to be there, maybe not for the entire trial, but at least to try to catch part of it. That's my intention, because to me that, like I said earlier in the show, is the most important case. And Powerbeard, what a cool name.
Yeah.
Do I sleep? Yes, I do. I actually carve out time in my schedule to sleep. And then I actually usually have a few free hours on Saturdays, which is really nice.
Lucky.
I bury myself in the news. And I think that I do that because I think this is kind of a side effect of a symptom of PTSD. I feel like, like I have PTSD. I don't like surprises, right? So fireworks on 4th of July don't bother me because I know it's the 4th of July, but on the 9th of August, what the fuck? So I always watch movies I've seen. I've always watched TV shows I've seen. It's comforting to me. I like familiarity.
Same.
And I always guess the reason I got so steeped in the news is so that because knowledge to me is the enemy of anxiety. The more I know, I feel like the less shocked and surprised I'll be. So it's just, some people cope with PTSD with drugs or alcohol. Some people cope with toxic relationships, or some people cope with music. I'm a workaholic when it comes to that. And so I think that that's probably why it seems like I have the output of 2 people, is because I just spend so much of my day learning and trying to understand and researching. And, half the time I'm reading the news, and the other half the time I'm on the phone with my lawyer friends and DOJ friends asking, what is this? What does this mean? Is this possible? And you can hear the product of that if you listen to the Jack podcast or the Cleanup on Aisle 45 podcast that I do with Pete Strzok. I'm just so blessed to be surrounded by so many smart and incredible people. So I do sleep, I promise. It's 6 hours a night, but I do.
I want to say I appreciate what you do in this space, in all of the spaces. I think it's important. And when you say that you have PTSD, I don't want to diminish because you have actual PTSD, and I'm going to say that a lot of us kind of have figurative PTSD for what we've experienced over the past 6 years. Okay,
It's actual that you've been in an abusive relationship, socially speaking. And I mean, we had a COVID shutdown. We had an insurrection. These are traumatic events, and it's going to take a long time for our nation to heal. But go ahead.
So when you say you like to watch movies and TV shows that you've seen already, and it gives you a sense of, or let me speak for myself, right? It gives me a sense of normalcy, and the times that we are in right now are very abnormal. And I feel like we are watching, when we watch the news, we're watching the news with you. When we watch the news, a lot of it feels very unnatural because there's one guy who seems to have been getting away with crime after crime after crime after crime. And we get trolled a lot because, yeah, we're anxious to see this motherfucker get put away. We're anxious to see him be held accountable. We're anxious to see the normalcy return to our world. And what you do in the time, the hours, and the days and the weeks that you devote to throwing yourself into work and making some kind of sense out of this craziness that we experience, you help bring us back to a sense of normalcy. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you do for everybody. You're doing a public service, and
and you know what, sometimes it works. Sometimes steeping myself in this and learning it and knowing it over and over again, because I won't be surprised, works. It just came across my feed right now, as a matter of fact, breaking news, that the immunity that Mark Meadows was granted was in fact limited use immunity.
Look at you. You called that shit. Sure you did. Of course
so people
you did.
think I'm prescient or predicting things. It's like, no, I've just studied it so hard and so often and seen it so many times now that I just can sort of, I just can sort of see it coming. And that makes it so much more comforting to me. And I can't imagine. And so the thing that I wanted to do for people was, man, I could probably help people, because I can take all of this stuff and break it down and make it simple to understand. And they call it, somebody called me the docket whisperer, because the legalese is very difficult to to translate into layman's terms. But if everybody sort of understands what's going on in the world, you know, in this particular sort of autocratic creep democracy in peril world, then maybe they won't be so scared and shocked and traumatized by it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you guys. I've held Allison here long, long
Okay, it's
past
been
the
great.
expiration date. I did promise 30 minutes. We went over by 30 minutes.
Thank you, Jamie, the
About.
Packers fan from Wisconsin. Thank you.
So here, Jamie has been kind enough to put up Daily Beans cleanup on aisle. Is it 45 or 44?
45, probably just typo.
Okay, clean up on aisle 45, and you don't know Jack.
It's
Make
just
sure
called
you go.
Jack. It's just called Jack.
You changed it to Jack?
There's some copyright issues. Yeah, it's Jack.
Okay. You can find all of this stuff on mswmedia.com. Allison, thank you so much once again for joining me tonight. I know you've had a very, very busy schedule, but this has been fantastic. I hope I can convince you to come back at some point and share some more of your wisdom with us.
It's always good to see one of my fellow Twitter prom page shill propagandist grifter friends.
Indeed 'tis. All right, and
what is wrong with people? This guy the other day, he's like, "Yeah, but do you make money?" And I'm like, "At my job? Yeah." Do you work for free? Like, oh. They want us to work for free bad.
That's right.
Yeah, I got my $18 check from Sirius. So,
I'm still waiting for the George Soros checks. Whatever happened to those?
Are we supposed to pick? Is there a? I don't know.
It's at the next Antifa meeting.
Right at the press club in DC where Antifa meets.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me and Allison for another wonderful episode of Late Night with BDD. I'm your host, BDD, aka Brooklyn Dad. And if you have not yet gotten your shot, what are you waiting for? Go get one. You save your own life. Keep your social distance 6 feet or better, and enjoy the rest of your evening. I look forward to seeing you guys here, same time, same place. I love you all. Peace. And let's see what we have here. We have Jamie from Wisconsin saying, glad she could make it once. Watcher Soko saying, thank you, Allison. You're a huge help with understanding all of this. Lynn B saying, thanks, Allison and BDD. Meredith Powell with Snoochie Boochies, everyone. Do you know what that's from?
Yes.
What's that from?
It's from the Chasing Amy movie.
Okay. We would have also accepted Clerks, right?
Okay.
Wasn't that?
Kevin Smith joints. Yeah.
Yeah. Diane London says, brilliant and funny. Free Fallen says, great conversation. Hope to see many more. Thanks, BDD and Allison. Happy to meet you all. Have a great rest of your night.
You too, Free Fallen.
All right, you guys. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. It's that time. You need to leave.